Don't want to pay 4 guys to not work for 6 hours? Okay, you can pay 30 guys to not work for 6 hours, by user Billiam201. To make an already long story as short as possible, some background. I am a manager for a North American railroad, and a lot of our work involves different crafts of employees. Different crafts have different unions and different work rules. The managers of the other crafts and I work together well to get done what we need to get done, especially when some of the work needs to get done at night. The track guys can have a crew assigned to nights, while the signal guys can't. Even better, the signal guys who work overnight have to be let go after 12 hours, and if it's now their regular shift because they came in last night, they get paid the rest of the day to go home and sleep. Track guys have all 3 shifts, but we only have a day shift and an evening shift, but no night shift, because the big hats don't want to hire enough people to do it. Now, the company has decided that paying guys to go home 2 hours early on a Thursday, come in and work overtime all night at 10 p.m., and go home at 10 a.m., getting another 4 hours pay to go home and sleep is the ending of all that is good and pure in the universe, and will eventually lead to the collapse of capitalism, the nation, and indeed the universe itself. So they decide that the second shift guys have to stay 4 extra hours, and the first shift guys have to come in 4 hours early. I point out that 1. I can't force employees to work overtime unless it's an emergency, and the union isn't likely to agree that we want to do this at night so we don't affect traffic is an emergency. 2. Not all employees are qualified on the same things. 3. Since they took half of my trucks away 5 years ago, because savings. I don't have enough vehicles for an entire second crew to show up at 2 a.m. and relieve the guys working in the field so they can go home. The guys currently working will have to stop work, pack up the tools, drive back to the office, let the smaller relief crew load up, drive back out to the work site, do the starting paperwork and briefings, and begin the work. And most importantly, 4. That while we aren't there, the track guys can't work, because we have to keep taking things off of the rails so the track guys can do their work, and then put them back when the guys are done so we can run the trains in the morning. All of it falls on deaf ears, because the freckle-faced college kid, who opens every conversation with "I have an MBA, damn it," who has somehow gotten to a position where he's in charge of the estimates wants to complain about those 24 hours a night. So, after having gone on the meeting record for all of it, I get out of the kid's way. I decide that if my boss isn't going to have my back, I'm not going to stop this inevitable disaster. After all, I have only been doing this for 27 years, but he graduated with a 3.6 GPA from UTEP, so he must know better. So, the first night, the job grinds to a halt like clockwork at 1 a.m., the second crew shows up at about 4:15, and they get to work. The track folks pack it in, because by the time anything gets dismantled, there won't be enough time to get anything done and put it all back together to start moving trains by 7. Second night, the shift change was a little smoother, so they got out there at 3:45. Managed to get a little work done before packing up. Third and fourth night it rained really hard, so the drive back to the shop and out to the job site took extra time. No work done after the new crew showed up at 4:30. Bright and early Monday morning we show up at our morning meeting to find that the track guys got about 30% of the work done that they'd planned for the week, and at this pace would finish a 6-week job more than 15 weeks behind, and over budget by more than 300%. Mr. MBA proceeds to launch into his carefully rehearsed speech about key metrics, percent spent vs percent complete, and all sorts of other nonsense. Then he decides to start in on me. Since I obviously conspired and colluded with my employees to egregiously erode progress for an entire week. I held up the meeting minutes from the previous week, told him in no uncertain terms that he had asked, in fact demanded that we have a full shift change in the middle of the track department's work. I looked across the table at him, and asked him if he wanted to revise that position. Completely unwilling to let this lowly engineer tell him what to do, he said no, and I was supposed to somehow magically make the shift change faster. Next 3 weeks were the same story. They've now been out there for a month, and have managed to accomplish just shy of a week and a half of work. Mr. MBA shows up on the site one night, just in time to watch my night guys walk off, watch the track guys shut down the machines and gather outside to smoke, hang out, and generally carouse, because they know they now have 3 hours to screw off, and be paid for it. My guys had called me when Mr. MBA showed up, so I get out of bed and get to the job site just in time to see this guy in his shiny fresh from the package safety gear screaming at the top of his lungs to the guys to get back in their equipment and get the naughty back to work. They all refuse because they all know that they can't work without us there. Not that they care all that much about our equipment, but because they know Mr. MBA has been throwing a little too much weight around, and nothing makes union employees stick together better or faster than putting the screws to a manager who really needs it. I walk up during a profanity-laced tirade, and cut right in and say, well, Mr. MBA, I'm sure you're not suggesting that these qualified employees violate Rule XXX, which clearly states that they shall not, under any circumstances, run that equipment through a switch that the signal department hasn't checked, would you? That would be a serious violation, and could get him a 30-day suspension without pay. And if you were to suggest that he do that, you wouldn't have a union card in your pocket, and he would have 30 witnesses that saw you give him that directive. So you wouldn't be suggesting that, would you? He turned 3 shades of purple, stomped back to his little white company sedan, and drove away. He held on to his asinine mid-shift shift change for another 2 weeks until he couldn't hide the massive production delays from his boss anymore, and suddenly he wasn't in charge of the estimates anymore. The total cost of his little venture? Just over $940,000 over the course of 6 weeks. But, he did manage to save $700 a night on those off hours that he didn't have to pay for. Edit, without doubt, the best part of this post is that I'm up to 11 different railroads being mentioned between the posts and the DMS of guys swearing that this has to be their railroad. These are the new metrics? Okay. Everyone is fired, by user superb_raccoon. So I work at a large company. Fortune 50 company. But, like everywhere, management comes up with one-size-fits-none metrics. The latest was revealed to us by our manager, who surprisingly is the hero of this story. It has always been the metric that if you fell below 70% of your quota on a quota-eligible role, you risk being put on a performance review plan. It is also well known that anyone getting on a PRP is pretty much toast. Either you get fired for failing the PRP, or you are first on the next layoff list. And usually, they replace you with a newbie fresh out of college, in one of the lower 2 bands. My particular team is made up of all senior people. Every one of us is in one of the top 2 skill grades. So we know we are a target, which is insane, as all of us engage the C-suite at other very large Fortune 500 companies and act as trusted advisors. We cannot be replaced by a new grad with intern-level performance. So our intrepid hero, my boss, is pulled into a 2-day seminar about 2 months ago that goes all the way to the General Manager of Sales, Americas. Several senior HR managers are there too. It is a rare in-person meeting, so people are cautious, but at least they know it is not a mass layoff kind of deal, as the first day is about the path forward and how important our division is to the company strategy. They go on about how our division is the front line of expanding sales in our partner program, to take it from 60% of revenue to 85% of revenue, with 75% of new growth expected to come from the partner channels. The company absolute is relying on our division and our skilled staff to deliver on that goal. The second day is different, however. In the afternoon, they lay out the new plan for technical sellers, 80% attainment per year, and backdating 2 years. It is a rare in-person meeting, so people are cautious, but my manager goes into I am just asking questions mode. So let me understand, if last year they hit 100% attainment, and 75% of the team did, but the previous year they hit 79%, then they are on a PRP. HR hems and haws, well yes, that is how it would work. I see. And there is no exceptions. The GM speaks up. That's correct. Everyone must be a top performer. No exceptions. My manager starts gathering his things up. Would you mind if I skipped the rest of the day? I have a lot of work to do, apparently. The GM looks at him. Well, no, we have more to cover. What is so urgent? He looks at the GM, and maliciously complies with the stated metrics. Based on the metrics and the no exceptions rule, I have to prepare PRPs for my entire team. No exceptions. I will need to start the open headcount to hire replacements for everyone too. The GM looks confused, attempting to digest this new information. Most of the rest of the managers stick their hands up. We need to go too, we need to write up PRPs for all our people too, and submit open headcounts. A quick count shows that 80% of our division would be on a PRP. Given the failure rate, that means about 70% of the team will be fired, 10% will be laid off, and 20% will remain. For the growth strategy of the company, the tip of the spear in partner sales. My boss points out that retention of personnel and reduced turnover is part of the roll-up objectives, as well as attainment of his reports. That means he will be PRP'd, as will his manager, and her manager, all the way up the chain. No exceptions. The meeting wraps up after the discussion dies down and the GM says they are not implementing this now, but in a few months. In those 2 months there are more online meetings, questions asked, more data pulled from the HR systems, meetings with HR and legal who is now very interested in this plan of theirs, culminating in a meeting this last Monday, where the revised plan is revealed. A new exceptions plan has been put in place, at the insistence of the legal department. Gone is the informal put together a package to be evaluated for an optional exception for your employee. Now, there is a set of formal exceptions that cover a number of categories, legal ones like taking family leave or medical short-term disability in the last 3, and functional ones like having been moved between departments or job titles or having a non-quota designation in the last 2 years. If the quota plan changed significantly or had a metric with no previous history to set the target. There is 10 or 12 categories, depending if you count the overlaps. An exception resets the timer to the next calendar year. So if someone qualifies in January, they are off the hook until next January. Turns out everyone in the division now qualifies for one or more of those exceptions. Imagine that. Epilogue. Turns out HR did not do an analysis of how many people would be impacted in our division as the numbers were done worldwide over 100k employees with quota, not by department. Their number said 11% of us would end up on PRPs. Let's not get into how they are trying to reduce headcount by driving people into leaving or retiring early. Also, when legal found out they were backdating the requirement, they went ballistic. Legal also went spare when they saw no exceptions for federally protected leave like family or medical disability. Gotta love my boss, he looks out for us, often by maliciously complying with stupid requirements. Stripped of manager position. Okay, I can do that, by user BlueBoy714. This happened decades ago, but after reading another MC I figured I'd post this. I was a manager of a programming department. I initially had 5 programmers reporting to me and I was able to spend half of my time programming and half managing. I had always gotten exceeds or far exceeds expectations on my annual reviews. About 10 years later my team had 25 people and I was spending less and less time programming. Fast forward a few years and I missed 2 months during the year for a surgery and hospital stay, and in my annual review my boss, who knew nothing about programming, told me I was not doing a good job and the programming department was missing deliverable dates, probably because I was in the hospital. They wanted me to go back to just programming and I was stripped of my manager and only focus on programming. I was pissed off, but I told him that I can do that. I told my former staff what had happened and told them to direct all questions to my boss, who knew zero about programming. He was overwhelmed and soon senior management figured out that my boss was the problem, not me. They canned him and replaced him with the VP of programming in the UK, I am in the US. She was great since she started as a programmer and was an excellent boss in general. Since I was just a programmer now, all of the managers were in the UK and I told my former staff to direct all questions to their new bosses in the UK. Since there was 6-hour time difference and we only overlapped 2 or 3 hours each day, that made getting questions answered in a timely fashion quite difficult. In the meantime my health wasn't the best and my doctor told me I should go to a 4-day/32-hour work week so my health wouldn't continue to suffer. Since my employer was a strict 40-hour week company, I looked for another job and got 8 job offers in about a month. I was ready to resign. Finally, after a few months, my new boss asked me to be a manager again because of the time difference between US and UK and because I most experience as a programmer in the company. Instead I gave her my resignation and explained why. She asked me what it would get me to stay and I told I wanted a 10% raise and wanted to work 4-day/32-hour work. I gave her 24 hours to respond. She spoke to higher ups and finally came back the next day and agreed. Boss took credit for my work. Malicious compliance occurred, by user vague ambiguous name. A few years ago I was hired as a manager to create the contracts department of a tech startup. My boss was on an opposite coast as me and we barely spoke. About a year in, the company hired consultants to overhaul depths except for contracts because it was running so smoothly. I was truly proud of this. The company sent me on a paid trip to the Bahamas as a thank you. After I got back from vacation I asked for a raise to director level. My boss said I just wasn't there. I asked for a list of what I would need to do to be director. He sent me a list which was everything I was already doing and basically admitted that if I was director he would no longer be able to take credit for my work. Friends told me I needed to either leave or put up and shut up. Instead, I chose to kill with kindness. I wholeheartedly apologized to my manager for overstepping, and said that I am going to step back into the manager role. I printed out the manager responsibilities and posted them to my desk. Things went south quicker than I could have imagined. We started missing sales targets. Product said my boss agreed to a term in an agreement that would completely destroy their budget and product rollout. My boss didn't know commission agreements and let sales manipulate contracts, so we were paying commission on contracts with termination clauses. I only interjected once to stop a contract amendment from being approved because my boss was unknowingly letting a VP artificially inflate sales numbers. The controller and CFO had to get involved. Eventually the CEO was called in. Stories started circulating about my boss holding stress balls and cursing in meetings. I was more relaxed than ever, and during my newfound free time at work I studied for and obtained professional certifications. I would also leave work early to get to the gym before it got busy. About a month after I unloaded my added responsibilities, my boss gave me a 7% bonus. It was unspoken, but I could tell he wanted me to take back on the director responsibilities without the title, but I continued to follow the manager description to a T. 6 months later, after taking 10 days of my unlimited PTO, I was included in layoffs. Took 3 months off and then got another job at a 35% salary increase. While I am happy to be making more money, I truly loved the company and people I worked with, and it's defeating to watch someone continually take credit for your work. You don't get the grade as you don't manage projects, by user Wilm 1975. In short, had a meeting with my manager in HR where he explained that I don't get the next grade as I don't manage projects. An hour later the same manager asked for a status on a project. I replied calmly, "I don't know, ask the project manager." The manager responded, "Don't be like that, I haven't got anyone else." I just said, "Well, that's not my problem, you were very clear with HR that I don't manage projects." Strangely, that particular manager left the company and no one missed him.